Hey, Kath, got a joke for you. Have you heard the one about the fastball?
No, never.
All right, forget it. You missed it. You get it? You missed it because, it was
it was so fast.
It was
went by me.
Fastball, like 95 miles an hour there.
Got it. Why are we talking about baseball?
Isn't this episode about all things pitching? Like Shohei Ohtani?
Wow, I get it. Yeah, pitching, media pitching, baseball pitching.
That's what it is. All right.
The king of puns.
I'm easily confused. Cue the music. Hello and welcome to Off the Mark with the Bickersteins.
Today we are getting the inside advice about media pitching stories to get in the news. Yeah, you have to actually pitch to get in the news. Sometimes it just doesn't automatically happen.
And the gods don't align and the things don't fall from the sky. And you actually have to pitch. You have to put together a story, something that the person will be interested in.
Yes. And when we were reporters, we were pitched all day long.
What was the worst pitch you ever got?
And I would catch them because I was a good baseball player.
Back to that. All right.
What was the worst pitch?
Yeah.
Oh, it would be like, hey, we got a new president at the hospital. And I'm like, yeah, what's the story about that? I don't care. Was he doing something? Did he just cure cancer? Is he bringing... Yeah,
so it's the guts of the story. Yes, the new president of the hospital may not be the story. The story is, who is this person and why might viewers be interested?
Well, and most of the time, viewers would never be interested in the new president of the hospital.
When I was at Food Network, people used to, you should do this restaurant in our town. It's got golden arches and they serve hamburgers. And I'm like, yeah, it's nice of you to think of me. I appreciate it. But okay, but this isn't always about us. Today, I'm really looking forward to learning from our guest today. He's Matt Glassman. He's the assistant news director at NBC4 Washington. This is the big guy at the #1 station in the nation's capital, or as he says on his Twitter account, he's the assistant news director for the top TV station in the best news city in the world. And this is the guy you send pitches to.
But he's not reading your pitches. He's like, the reporters are bringing the pitches to him and he's saying, no,
he reads pitches. Well, we'll find out. I'm pretty sure
we're going to ask.
Yeah, I've had conversations with
him.
That's
because you know him.
I only know him because we've pitched him. That's really the only reason I know him.
Okay.
And he's been nice enough to join us. So
maybe he'll give us some gossip about what's going on at Channel 4.
That's the other podcast we do. The inside story at your local news station.
Yeah, there's always gossip. Come on.
That's what we live for. Okay, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about Matt Glassman, who's nice enough to join us today. He's a graduate of American University. Who else do you know is a graduate of American University?
I don't know. Who?
Willard Scott, the late, great Willard Scott. I was there, I think, in the Goldie Hawn years, but I think that it's like the four of us.
The Goldie Hawn semesters.
He started as a part-time production assistant. Is that correct?
That's right.
Wow. And worked his way up I want to know how he worked his way up. And there are some names you may recognize that only became names that you could recognize because they worked with Matt Glassman.
That's it. Yeah.
So it's not name dropping if I ask you to do, but who's gone on to national renown from NBC4?
Well, when I started at NBC4, it was January of 2000, and my weekend night reporter, I was a weekend night editor at the time, was Savannah Guthrie. And she was a part-time reporter with us. She was a Georgetown law student. She had been in TV news before and came to Washington and wanted a part-time job. And I had forgotten this, but she's reminded me, she didn't even have a car. I used to drive her home after the weekend evening live shots. She would come back to the station and I'd drop her off at home. So we knew each other quite well.
Wow. So Savannah Guthrie, and that's where she sat, she picked your brain and she learned from you.
We were both learning together back then, I have to tell you, but there's plenty more. Craig Melvin and Lindsay Zarniak were with us for a number of years. And I EP'd a show where they were sort of thrown together as anchors often. And I've heard them say before that show really kind of figured out how they clicked together. So that was kind of nice.
Well, they went on to get married, have kids. I mean, she went off to ESPN for a while. He's at MSNBC.
And NBC, and the Today Show.
And the Today, that's right. Yeah.
And
you brought them together.
know about that, but we had a good time. And then there's plenty others. Miguel Almaguer was with us, and Megan Fitzgerald was with us. Shannon Bream, who's now at Fox News, was with us. There's a lot of people that get noticed when they're at our station. So it's been wonderful to kind of watch them go on and stay in touch with them.
Good for them and good for you. And that just shows you the kind of powerhouse that NBC4 is. So that is why we are glad to be with you today and have you as our guest and to pick your brain, because we talk a lot about pitching. So we need to know the inside scoop. We need to know how this works. Well, but before we do that, how did you work your way up from production assistant to assistant news director?
Well, I had interned at NBC4 when I was in college at American Across the Street. And so I knew the folks there, and that led to a part-time job for about a year. Then I decided to go to grad school. I moved to New York. I went to NYU. I had a great time there and learned a lot. Ended up coming back, did a couple other things, and kind of knocked on the door of NBC4 and said, I kind of want to come back. I miss it. And they said, well, you're not really qualified to do anything, but we'll kind of give you this part-time job. So I did that for a little bit of time. And then, I got onto the assignment desk because I showed that I was so interested in what was going on. I knew a little bit more than I think the average entry-level person that starts there. And I did that for a few years. It was such great training. A lot of people they start as writers, but I got to know so much, the information on how to get information from towns and cities and counties and how to know all the PR people and what they're pitching and get that. I don't even think before I was on the desk, I knew the difference between Frederick and Fredericksburg. But boy, do I sure do now. Knew all the equipment that you had to know for different kinds of stories. It was such great training. And then I kind of got, all right, I'm ready for the next step. And I started to produce stories. I did that for a few years until we decided to start this afternoon talk show that Craig and Lindsay were anchoring at the time. So I did that for a few years, and that led to a whole channel that we did for a while. And it just sort of kept going. And I found myself involved in a lot of different pieces, not only of the newsroom, but of the station, to make sure that shows were trafficked the right way and all that other stuff. So it just sort of kept going until 2013 when I got the job I'm in now.
Wow. So that's the lesson in not taking no for an answer, in fact.
And when you walk in the door, figure out what you want to do and get to know everybody. One of the things that I did was I had been watching the station for a long time. So I knew the people on air. I had remembered some of them from when I worked there, but I wanted to develop the kinds of relationships with them. I wanted to get to know them. And so I really got to know everybody. So when it came time for jobs to be open or things like that, unbeknownst to me, I had a lot of advocates that were sort of going behind my back to the bosses and saying, you got to hire this guy. You got to give this guy another shot at this, or you got to give him a chance at this. And I didn't learn till much later how beneficial that all was.
That is, yeah. I was there for a cup of coffee in 99. Were you there when I was there?
I came in January of 2000, but the mug was still in the sink.
Oh, okay.
He never cleaned it.
I was there during the Friends contract when they didn't have pads and pencils because they were paying Friends actors so much
I was
money.
at NBC O&O at that same time in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they literally they had no. They're like, we can't afford notebooks. You have to buy your own.
David Schwimmer gets $1 million an episode, and I got to buy my own pads. Yeah. Okay, fine, whatever. That's it.
Well, I'm happy to say that GE sold us to Comcast, which has been a fantastic change in terms of the numbers of pencils and paper that we have sitting around.
It's good to know you guys now have pencil and paper.
Yes.
All right, let's get to pitching. Now, we were just arguing about this because, it's Kathy and I, and that's what we do. I've pitched you directly. Do you read pitches yourself, or is it coming from the reporters, or just mix and match?
I was telling him, no, my bosses didn't read pitches. Like I was the reporter. I would get the pitches. We'd have our morning meeting, and then we would pitch and fight for our stories.
Your bosses would get them from sales from upstairs.
Well, no, they did not. I had Bill Lord. He was very
over at Channel 7.
At Channel 7.
That was stopped by that.
There's the separation. People don't realize there's a wall.
And you
separation.
cannot climb that wall. Wink, wink.
But trust me, the sales guys will like kind of slip something to you sometimes on the side, but they know they're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to. They're like, why is the sales guy in the newsroom? Get him out of here.
Why is he saying hi to me?
All right,
okay,
enough of that. That does not happen at Channel 4.
But I don't ever remember like Bill Lord or my bosses getting pitched. But do you get pitched? Like, does people go, hey, let's go straight to the job?
Well, I do. And I don't know that that's because anybody knows what my job is, but because I've been there for so long and I've had so many different kinds of jobs that I think people still have me in their database, which means that, I get tons of emails and tons of pitches. And no, I don't read them all, but I definitely look at them all. I have to. I'm in the news business because I want to know what's going on. And I didn't want to be a reporter because I wanted to be in the newsroom all day and I wanted to know everything that was happening that day, not just be sent to really cover one story and really become an expert on that for the day. So yeah, so I do look at them.
So when whether I would open up a pitch or not, and what we'll tell people is that email subject line has got to be crucial, because if you can write gold in the email, if your email subject line is new president at Washington Hospital Center, then, I'm not even going to open it because I don't necessarily care. What would you say, like, to get your initial attention? Are there things, or do you remember like a good email subject line, or just anything that would?
Yeah, what works for you? To get
What works?
I mean, I think you need to craft it as if you're crafting a headline for a newspaper. It kind of serves two purposes. It gives you a succinct view of what the story is, but it also is a little bit marketing, a little bit of a sell to it. And that's the kind of thing that, you've got to make it intriguing for me to look down from the headline of an article to read the article. Same thing. You've got to make it so that I'm going to say, okay, well, this is interesting. You're right. I mean, new CEO at a hospital is really not that great. Now, the reality is that it may not be anything great. It may be somebody who's coming from another city and we don't know him, and they're just basically putting him there, and that's all there is. And they're just doing their due diligence and not expecting much from us because we don't cover that. The Business Journal would cover it. Some other, some medical publications might cover it. And that's sort of the problem with email, that there's just sort of this, like, just send it widely and just sort of, surely somebody's going to like it. Somebody's going to pick it up. And so there really isn't that kind of tailoring anymore. But yeah, I mean, the headline, the subject line is important.
Would you say too, for PR people who are pitching, it's better not to go wide? It's better to do your homework on the people that you're sending the story to and be very micro targeted. Because after a while, back in the day, I used to get mail, pitches in mail. And then once I opened up a couple and I knew they were wasting my time, I wouldn't even open up the envelope. I would throw it in the trash. Yeah. But so developing that rapport as a PR person.
Aggressive there, wasn't it?
To throw it in the trash. Well, I knew it was crap. So I was like,
I'm not going to waste my time with this.
I'm not going to, God forbid, opening the envelope. It took a lot of energy.
And there were probably envelopes with the same thing in everybody else's mailbox in the newsroom.
Yes, exactly.
Those used to come in by the truckloads.
Yeah. And they probably don't do that anymore, but maybe they do. Maybe mailing something is actually a good way to get somebody's attention.
We don't get a lot of mail, but yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of mistakes that I see. And most of those are through, those services like Cision or things like that. Because somebody uploads a version of a press release and it says, we'd love to invite WUSA to come cover this or something like that. That's not the name of my station. Or they'll say, Dear Dylan, because that's the first name in their database and things like that. So those get up there. But yeah, the relationship thing is so important. There's definitely people that I have gotten to know over the years who will let me know whether I know them or not when there's a good story. And sometimes they'll even say in the first line, hey, I just want to make you aware of this just in case, but I know this is probably not in your whatever. Any sort of recognition of what I'm looking for, what I'm going through, that you're not just sending this blanket press release out there, that you're actually saying, hey, this is something that you may want, you may not want. Anybody that knows what our franchises are, what our segments are, what our beat reporters do, who can kind of personalize in a way to say, okay, this is somebody who actually took a minute and researched our station or figured out what we do or got to know me in some way. And they're sending this in a way. If you took a minute to craft it, I'm going to take at least a minute to look through it. So absolutely, that relationship thing is a big deal.
Relationship's important. So I'm going to go clean that cup out of the sink. Right.
Yeah, you should go. You'll probably be arrested. You'll probably be arrested as soon as you walk into the newsroom unannounced.
So that's all vital. But does Dear Dylan or something like that just automatically get you to throw it in the garbage, or will you still take a look at it?
No, I've waded through many, many bad press releases or mistakes to find a good story. A good story is going to get told even if it comes from a bad press release. My job is to make sure that we're telling the stories of what's going on in our region every day. And that's not going to come in a polished version in the right way every day. So if there's a news person out there that thinks that and says, well, if it's not coming straight to me, I'm going to go, no offense, Kathy, throw it straight in the trash or something like that, then you're either very focused or you've got a lot of news that you want to do on your own and you're not looking for a PR person. But for someone like me, who's got to really kind of keep my eye over everything, it's incumbent upon me to really kind of understand what's going on. And after the first couple lines, I remember this press release from years ago when something at the Gaithersburg Air Park or the Montgomery County Air Park in Gaithersburg was doing this thing, and they called it operationally manned air vehicles. They called it some long name and things like that, and come for a demonstration and see how they work. And it was this long garbled press release and whatever. And I didn't understand it at all. Well, now I look back at it, I'm like, oh my God, that was a drone. That was a drone thing that I don't know if the word wasn't invented, but they made it such a complicated press release and we couldn't see the forest through the trees on it. And so, that was one that I always remember that fell through the cracks. I remember walking around the newsroom thinking, do you understand this? Do you understand this? Are we missing something by not going? Should we send somebody to this? Should we send our chopper over it? What is it? Is it a chopper? What's going on here? So yeah, there is a lot of bad stuff. If people stopped sending press releases because they weren't great at it, I would have nothing. I wouldn't have as much to report.
I mean, how much of your day do you spend doing this? Because this could take hours out of, and you got a few things to do there.
Well, and that's bad because there are definitely some times when I get back to my desk or I look at my phone and there's a lot of things in my inbox and I probably don't give everything its due, which I guess is an argument for why people send things so widely and say, let me just send this to everybody and just assume that everybody's not going to think somebody else got it and delete it themselves. I'm one that likes to go through the day and just go through my email. I don't like to just get back and have all of a sudden, 300 emails that I've got to kind of go through in the next 15 minutes for my next meeting. So it takes a while.
All right. So this is a debate we had in our office just yesterday, which is, does it?
So, well, we had a,
you were in Hollywood yesterday. So.
I was in Hollywood, but my client wasn't in the Hollywood Times.
That is true. That is.
Yeah. And it wasn't because I was in Hollywood. That had nothing to do with it. It's a local bank and they, and this guy's brilliant. He was talking about mortgages and basically.
Local bank in DC. That the Hollywood Times picked up.
Yeah, the Hollywood Times in California picked up because they thought it was a good story. But basically saying that, our story pitch was, 30-year mortgages is kind of the norm for our generation or our parents' generation. You always do the 30-year, a lot of first-time home buyers.
Are you trying to pitch him a story right now?
Keep going. It's good. We're all good.
I'm giving him background.
Okay.
If he happens to think it's a good story, that's okay too. But anyway, so this guy was saying, listen, we need to rethink the 30-year loan. Honestly, go 20-year. It's not that much more and you'll save like a shit ton of money. And we said shit ton of money. No, we didn't say that in the pitch. But anyway, we had some local pickup, but the Hollywood Times picked this story up and wrote this great article, really thoughtful. So we were talking internally and I was like, listen, if we want to get local coverage, when I was a TV reporter, I didn't care if it was a Hollywood Times article, I might
this is the most the Hollywood Times has been mentioned ever.
I never even heard of the Hollywood Times.
The Hollywood Reporter, and they go, no, the Hollywood Times.
Hollywood Times. Well, they only have 25,000 unique visitors a month, so they're small. But I was like, let's maybe include that in some of the pitches, not to other, Hollywood newspapers, obviously, because we're not trying to go to Hollywood. So the question is, if you include another news story, newspaper, and you're pitching TV, is that a turn off
coverage,
or is that a help? Like you're like, oh, well, I like this.
Yeah.
I like this newspaper, they included this newspaper story. And I'm like, now the pitch was okay, but wow, I saw the headline and I saw it in this small town newspaper. Yeah, I might be more interested in covering it. Or would that turn you off because you're like, the Hollywood Times already covered it, so everybody already knows about it?
I don't care at all that the Hollywood Times covered it. I don't even care a lot of times if other stations in town covered it. I mean, I know that our viewers, most of our newscasts win every day and our viewers watch us. And if it was on another station, they probably didn't see it. Obviously, if there's a big exclusive or something that's really huge, that's great. But I don't care about that. Would it help for background? I don't know. I mean, I suppose if you're pitching it to my station, I think you'd pitch it in a different way than if you pitched it to a couple other stations around here. I guess that sort of leads into, the fact that if you really kind of understand how to pitch something, you really have to understand what's going on in newsrooms right now and what they're going through. We're all fighting for viewers, between social media and cable and streaming. We just need to make sure that anybody who actually comes to the table, anybody who turns on a newscast, gets something that they won't see anywhere else. Not meaning that they won't see that story anywhere else, but that they won't get the news from all these other things I just mentioned. And different stations have taken different approaches. Some have said, we've got to assume that viewers already know the news by the time they come to us because of push alerts and social media. So we need to give them more context in ways that it will impact them. Not here's what procedurally has to happen for the debt ceiling to be raised, but here's this is why it's important and why it might impact you. And people don't necessarily get that by scrolling through social media. And that's a significant change from the old style of what people used to do. Other stations have basically become more personality driven and said to viewers, hey, come watch the news with us and our fun group of people. And we're all going to have a good time. And we're going to, we'll make sure that, we all watch the news together. We're all involved together and we're going to do a lot of chatter. And then other stations have said basically, hey, we're digital first. And we're going to put whatever we do on digital on TV, but that's the future and that's where we're going. So stations obviously mix and match, and sometimes they're not loyal to one approach. But if you pitch that story to me, Kathy, I would say, yes, there's a trend going on and it's 20 years versus 30 years, and that's a great approach. But I don't know how that affects most people. It's got to be something where you say, if you're looking at buying a home these days, you can save X number amount of dollars by doing it this versus this. or you can avoid this fee or this tax by doing this and this. And obviously that's a story that I would do to one of our beat reporters. We've got someone who covers consumer stuff, and she basically is in that world. And so when she comes on TV, people know that she covers how to save time, how to save money. And she does it in a way that is strictly, we're working for you. That's our slogan. So we're helping you figure out if this is the right thing for you. So it's not just basically like, this is a new trend, isn't it great? It's here's how you know if it's the right thing for you. If you pitch that story to another station in town, you might do it a little bit differently. You might kind of throw a little bit of a controversy in there and kind of say something that would invoke people chatting about things, about, well, this is better, because they've got that kind of camaraderie where they like to stop every story and talk about it. So there's different ways to do it. The bottom line with the basic question you asked is no, if just because something's on another story, on another station, I'm not going to not cover it. And if you include a link that it was covered anywhere, if it's basically like for background, here's how another organization covered it, great. If I read it like you're bragging that, hey, it got picked up in the Hollywood Times, you're missing out, I'm going to be like, really? So that's sort of the way that I would answer that question.
But okay, and this is not you guys, but if there's a story in the Washington Post, it's often likely to be covered in the news, correct?
Well, if it's important to their viewers, is what he's saying.
I'm not saying Channel 4.
So I will tell you, I have a ton of respect for the Washington Post. I start every day reading it, and I have for 30 some years. But they made a decision a while ago to kind of veer away from local news as a prime focus more than they used to. I mean, I still wake up every day and read it, but I used to wake up and be frustrated. How'd they get that story? How'd they know that? Where'd they get that from? How did I miss this? And that rarely happens anymore. Now, when they do break a story or when they do have something, they do it really well and they do it great. And I'm following them for sure. But now I read the paper and I see stuff we had done a few days ago. It's just not their focus anymore. They just sort of veer to a different focus. So that said, we still go to them and say, hey, you had a reporter that talked about this. Can we do a talk back with you? This is really interesting. Let's do something. So I would not say that they drive the agenda of the day locally anymore like they used to. But I don't want anyone to walk away thinking I don't respect the Post, because I think that when they got an exclusive or when they break a story or when they tell a story in the way that they tell it, they do it damn good.
And the same kind of goes for TOP. We've had clients on TOP that then get called by the network because they've heard them on TOP. Those things happen. Yeah.
And TOP also kind of changed its focus, several years ago and are doing some different stuff. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we're all consuming a lot of media and there's a lot of people that are making decisions about what stories to be covered that aren't necessarily on TikTok or Snapchat or seeing some of that kind of stuff. Although the right newsrooms have people who pitch stories from there. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff that you want to be able to say, you know what, basic question from 30,000 feet up. If this is what's happening in our region today, if this is what people are talking about, if this is what people know about, it doesn't matter that we didn't break it. We'll give you full attribution. But yeah, sure, we want to get in on that. Yesterday, the Post was able to first report that one of those zebras that's been roaming around Prince George's County was found dead a month ago. Well, we didn't know that. And we've been covering that story and we've been checking in with sources and we've been calling the county and we've been reporting on it. And we hadn't seen these zebras, but no one told us that and they got it. And sure, we're going to attribute the Post because they got that story. They got that at first. We're going to follow up with it and we're going to, follow up with it with a really good TV version, but we'll certainly give them attribution.
So
First
the other
of all,
thing,
I feel bad that the zebra died. And that's an amazing story because it's zebras running free. It's been gotten national coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And you're shaking your head, but no, people care
no. That's a great story.
It is.
It's like if the bears, break into people's houses and eat their honey or whatever. People like those stories.
Nursery rhyme?
No, I'm just saying there's so many stories that you see and you'll see them on social media, but you'll see them on local news where the bear comes in or the deer comes into the house. It's just like people are interested in that. They want to know if
Who did I hear on TikTok to talk about? I was listening to Rob Lowe's podcast, and he was saying that he talked to somebody in the know, and that TikTok is going to it's going to evolve way beyond what it is today. Of people dance.
I hope they do. I mean, they're smart if they would. They've got a captive audience.
Well, they
it's
already
going to be
are.
like the place you go for your new. That's literally
what
he said.
They already are. Our kids, our generation. Our daughter learns how to sew on TikTok. I don't know how she does it with the 30-second video, but has sewed an entire outfit. And I'm like, well, where did you learn? I learned on TikTok. How can you learn that in 30 seconds or a minute? And she's like, that's how they learn already. They're already getting that information.
Where can you find the latest breaking news, sports, entertainment, and podcast, all in one convenient place.
Well, I know where I go. Hello, everybody else should too. You're in luck because the place I go is the place you should go. It exists and it's 1631digitalnews.com.
1631digitalnews.com. 1631digitalnews.com. Can our listeners
say that 3 times?
I'll say it one more time. 1631digitalnews.com. Can listeners find our podcast there as well as baseball news there too?
Ah, yes. Along with the latest headlines, interviews, and in-depth stories from a short list of trusted media partners, all at 1631digitalnews.com.
That's 1631digitalnews.com. Now, I just
Check
want
it
to go
out.
back. We've been told that's not for us. That's a story for Channel 6.
You say
Because
6
it doesn't
because there is no
exist.
6.
There is 6 in this market.
In Philly.
Oh, well, that's true.
I definitely would say that story's not for us. I mean, I'm not sure that I'm advising people how to pitch their stories and where to go, but yeah, there are definitely stories that I would say, you know what, I don't really know that we would do. Again, a smart PR person will tailor a message who knows this market and has stopped to do some research, will tailor the market to know what the difference of between my station and Channel 6 is. Because they would say, okay, well, you know what, Channel 4 is never going to go for a story like this. That said, I will say this too, as part of a research that you're doing on a station, I mean, in the last few years, we've developed so many things that we never had before because we kind of had to. There was a time a few years ago where there was so much bad news in the news, so much sad news that we basically said, you know what, we need to create some moments in our newscast where people are happy and joyful. The Today Show kind of did that with their morning boost. And we created a community franchise in the morning where we go out and spend time with people. We created something in the evening in the same vein. We hired a few extra people to work on our OTT content, our stuff that goes on Roku and Fire Stick and things like that. And those are the kinds of stories that we would have always struggled with. Well, who's going to do this? Who's going to kind of do this sort of entertainment-y thing, or this father of this, or whatever's happening. And now we've basically got people that go out and shoot stories, and reporters are clamoring for that kind of thing too. They want to go out there and shoot some of these kinds of fun things. And we're able to shoot 5, 6, 10, 15-minute stories that run on these other platforms that we never could do before. So even though, yeah, I would tell you that that's not a story for one of our NBC4 news broadcasts on television, it doesn't mean that there's not a place for it here anymore. That's evolved.
So things get shot that don't get on the show, but they are online.
Like streaming or...
Yeah, sure. Well, things get shot and we'll say, well, let's shoot this story and come up with a TV version of it and boil it down into a couple minutes, and let's do a TV version of it too. But yeah, there's definitely things that are only shot for digital, or only shot for OTT platforms, or only shot for digital stuff. Yeah, 100%.
That's interesting.
Is digital first? I mean, I've seen signs in newsrooms that say digital first.
Well, there's a station group that has adopted that mantra, saying we really need to speak to those who are our future news viewers. And I think, what tends to happen, and this is not across the board, and I only know one market as intimately as I can talk about it, is that your loyal viewers for lots of years are like, well, this news isn't for me anymore. I'm not getting this, or I'm not understanding this, or I don't know how to sew in 30 seconds because that's the newest, coolest thing going on. I'm out of here. And they've actually lost viewers. Now, I'm not saying that that's permanent. They may come back, and I'm not saying that that's why they left. But you can sometimes tell when something was designed to be a digital story, and your website's has full content with lots and lots of stuff that you're basically picking and choosing and putting on television. You can kind of tell that a lot of times. And viewers who actually, again, take the time to sit down and watch the television news, they're not looking for that. And those young folks that you're trying to get on digital, they're not turning on the television news. Maybe a couple will eventually, get to you someday because they're home and somebody else is watching or something, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. And they may get a couple viewers that way, but in general, they're not growing viewers by that strategy from what I can see. Again, I'm far from any sort of detailed analysis. It's just my view of one market.
Yeah, some stations, we've mentioned this before, but we get calls from reporters. Please like my stuff. My engagement, my contract's coming up and my engagement needs to be up. And
there's stations that really measure that. They I know of one station that actually has boards on the wall that like kind of pits its anchors and reporters against each other. Who's got the best things? That's not our strategy. Everybody does different kinds of things, and some people's kinds of stories are better on Twitter, and that's not going to make us a ton of money, but that's where they belong. And some people's are better on Facebook, and some people are better on Instagram. We actually used to do something in our morning editorial meeting, and we've kind of stopped during COVID, but what's on the list to get back to it is the digital team would say, okay, this is what your platform is today, where we really want you to focus. We want you to focus on Facebook. We want you to focus on this. We want you to put your extra video, parts of your interview that you're not getting on Facebook. We want you to you're going down to cover this very visual thing. take 7 pictures and put them up, make an Insta story about it, and we'll follow it and we'll put it out there. So, that's strategic, but I don't know that we need to kind of create a Hunger Games situation or Squid Game situation.
Yes. Wow. He's right up to the moment there. This guy should do news.
Yeah. I mean, I think Channel 4 has a reputation as more old school, serious news. Like I was a medical reporter, obviously, back in the day, but like if I were to pitch a medical story today, I don't think Doreen Gensler is going to be as excited about, the latest wrinkle removing laser, where she would be interested in a cancer breakthrough or a local biotech company that's on the verge of curing HIV or something like that. Like those are the types of stories
Not
that
the cat lounge. Matt loves the cat lounge.
No. Well, the cat lounge.
We did the cat lounge. Here's what I would say to that, Kathy. You know what's interesting about that is good stations know their viewers, and our viewers shift and change. That's caused by demographic changes. That's caused by people aging out of the demo. That's caused by people coming into the demo. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we try to be very, very brand specific. We try to be strategic about what stories we're doing and why. And there is definitely that kind of thing. And part of the risk of that is that, you get to have a reputation. You're like, oh, I'm not going to bother them anymore. That's why it's really important to keep checking in and keep looking and seeing what stations are doing and how they're modifying and how they're changing their strategy, because we've shifted our strategy and some of it's been slight over the years. Every once in a while, we'll kind of take a little bit of a bigger leap and do some stuff. As I said, a few years ago, we added a morning community thing. We added a local radio DJ that does a lot of kind of fun stuff in the area to our I'm a contributor to do stuff on the air. We have a couple anchors doing some franchises that, again, point out different people, point out different kinds of things that a few years ago we never would have done. So you're absolutely right. We're definitely disciplined to our brand, but brands have to change as the audiences change, as your viewership changes. And we do a lot of research into that.
You wouldn't mind necessarily if a media pitcher is like, hey, Matt, listen, I know this is not your typical kind of story, but it's kind of interesting. It's happening in the area, and just thought I would throw it your way to see. I mean, that you'd be okay with that. That wouldn't annoy you as a pitch.
I have to be okay. Absolutely. I mean, as I said, I'm assuming that if you're reaching out and you're giving that caveat, that you've actually thought about it and know it, and that you've thought about, well, if there's a way to pitch this to you and your station, probably I haven't thought about it, but I'm just going to send it just in case. I'm going to absolutely give it, because I want to be like, all right, let me see if I can come up with it. There's that kind of competitiveness too. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, I don't want anybody to ever say, well, should I send this? Shouldn't I send this? Send it. The worst that can happen is we delete it or we tell you it's horrible.
Well,
So
should you pitch digital? I mean, should you just go, hey, to follow up on Kathy's idea, this would make a great digital story for, or this would make a great Tommy story.
Sure. Yeah. And that's part of figuring out how newsrooms have evolved. Who's deciding on digital stories these days? Is it the same people that's doing stories? Are they the same editorial meetings where these decisions are made? I mean, I know that, just about every email that I get that I think there's some shred of validity to, I'll forward it to someone and say, flagging this to you in case you didn't get it. And sometimes those are digital people, and sometimes those are people on beats. Sometimes it's to a morning producer that is looking for various stories, and it's to an evening one. Absolutely.
So how would you suggest, like, let's say you're an out of town PR person, you don't know the local TV market as well as the local people do. And so you don't know about some of these changes at Channel 4 in particular. So would you suggest that they pick up the phone and call the assignment editor and say, hey, I've got this story. Do you think there's a place for it? Who best should I send it to? Or would that annoy the assignment editor because he's listening at police scanners and all this other stuff, or trying to get crews out the door? Or would you rather them, send it to an EP? Like, how would you say to handle that best to annoy the least amount of people and get the right information?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it's never been easier to do that because you can kind of watch any station somehow. You can look at their stuff on OTT, you can look at their stuff on their website, you can look at the kinds of stories, you can look down the bios of the reporters on air, you can look at what they're tweeting and do a search about some, see if anybody's covering these kinds of stories. You can look at a bunch of things and kind of figure that out. Now, that takes work. It takes a lot of work because, again, you're looking at a couple different stations and maybe a bunch of markets and whatever. And so that's why I think people sometimes take the easy way out and just sort of do the spaghetti against the wall kind of thing. No, at this point, I used to say, call up and have a conversation with somebody at an off hour and say, hey, who's the best person for this? I don't know that I would suggest that anymore. I know of newsrooms that are getting rid of their phones. So I would say, again, try to establish a relationship with somebody in that newsroom or somebody who works there or somebody that in that area who can say, do you know anybody at this station? Do you know anybody here that I can say, hey, I'm so-and-so's friend and I'm looking to see, do you have anybody that covers this kind of stuff? And just send it as an email. I think most people at this point are happy with that. I don't like when people send me texts or LinkedIn messages or Facebook messengers or something, because I can't forward that as easy as I can in an email. So, people are like sort of all over the place. I don't check my LinkedIn very much, but every time I go, there's like 15 messages of story ideas. And I'm like, oh, geez, and most of those people aren't here. They just have looked up on LinkedIn, like I'm telling you to do, and find out that where I work and what I do and say, hey, I don't know if you, whatever. And that's great. But LinkedIn is hard for me because I don't really look at LinkedIn very often. And I haven't figured out how to forward a LinkedIn message to a couple people.
Yeah. So do your homework. If you really want to connect on a specific story, pay attention, watch the show, follow some reporters, Google.
But some reporters, and he makes a great point, which is he likes to be contacted by email. But I know reporters, somebody once I have to slide into their DMs.
Well, but that's because you know them and now they've told you.
Right.
But
so
you would never.
Different. So that's the point, is do some
Get to know the
research.
reporter. Yeah.
But what about civilians? And I call them civilian, but clients, like, you can do this yourself. I don't want our clients doing it themselves, but
yeah, you totally could.
Do you read from people who say, hey, I own a gas station and, we have this thing going on here? And I think people need to know that.
Yeah, I do. When I see someone's name or a headline, I don't know who that person is necessarily. Obviously, there's PR people and organizations that I recognize, but there's a lot of names I don't know. And they could be viewers, or they could be public relations people I haven't met, or they could be small business owners. And I would say the same thing for those folks. The good news is there's more platforms than we've ever had before. The franchises we've created, the different platforms. There's a lot of stuff out there. And there have actually been some small business kinds of things that I've actually said, oh, that's nice. Let's figure out how to do something with this. And, because I can see, they're giving me some emotion here. Hey, we're doing this. We're trying hard to survive. You've got this. Do you ever have chefs on your newscast, or you have this, whatever? And, we might, I don't know that I'll do the story they want me to do, but I might send a reporter down on a day that we're looking for a story about businesses downtown and how they're surviving during COVID. I might say, hey, you know what? These people sent something. Let's do something. Or if we're looking for a place for a shoot of some kind, I might say, why don't you, check out these people, see if they've got something. They get to my heart sometimes, those folks that are just trying to, survive in their small businesses.
I think people forget that news people have hearts and that, and they're right. Really, like when people would appeal to me and I'd be like, I can't do that story, but I'm going to think of a way to give back, or I'm going to figure it out somehow. I can't even pitch it as a story because it's not a story, but sometimes I would even help them out, and it had nothing to do with the news. I would just make a phone call and hope to smooth the path for them, because, I was like, who else is going to be able to do it? So anyway, I think people forget, right, that you guys have hearts, you're humans, you have feelings.
I agree. I've made so many calls to people who do constituent services, or we as a newsroom, or counsel people to say, hey, so-and-so in your place really needs help. I don't know if this is a story for me, but can you just reach out to them? And I've actually, the good ones will call back and say, thank you, we're good, we got them. Because people are desperate when they call a newsroom. For me to just hit delete on an email with somebody who's saying, help, I'm going to lose my home, because it's not a story I can do that particular day, and I'm the person that's between them losing their home. I don't want to live with that. So yeah, I'll definitely send that over to somebody who works in their jurisdiction, or I'll write them back and say, hey, who's your council member? What ward or town do you live in?
How many times do you have people calling you before they call the police or call the fire department? I remember being in the assignment editor be like, call 911 yet?
Don't call me first. Call 911.
I'm glad that our promos are working, but
that happened during the earthquake. That happens during things like that, when people will call us and be like, hey, there's something going on, or I see a big plume of smoke or something like that. But I don't know that there's anybody kind of rushing out of their house that's burning down to say, let me call Channel 4 before I call the fire department. Good God, I hope not.
We're talking with Matt Glassman, Assistant News Director at NBC4 in Washington, D.C. He's telling us about how to write a great media pitch and how it goes from a pitch onto the newscast. So you like the pitch, it still has to get through and get on the air. What are the chances still of it getting on the air, even if you like the pitch?
If I like the pitch, it equates to if I think there's a story here, and if I think there's something that our viewers should know or needs to know, or if I think this is a story that people are going to be talking about. Remember that every day we've got to really diversify. Got to have, not too many court stories, not too many political stories, not too many feature stories, not too many crime stories. And in regions like this, and Philly and New York and others have the same dilemma, we also have to consider geography. We can't have too many Maryland stories. We can't have too many Virginia stories. We can't do too many district stories. So we're really trying to diversify in lots and lots of different ways. And so, if there's a story out there that I get, I mean, it may not make the news that day. It may not be something that day. It might be something that I give to our planning editor and say, hey, let's look at a day next week where we've got a bunch of reporters scheduled that don't have anything that they're working on. And let's see, I see if this is something they want, or this is a story that maybe can combined into something else. Let's just hold on to this one. I mean, we keep lists and we keep information about things that are happening that may not make a story that day. But again, there's a bar. You're right. And the bar is, do people need to know about it? Are people going to be talking about it? Is this the kind of thing we've got to cover? And some of them evolve into really weighty meetings and discussions in our editorial meetings because they're loaded or there's a lot to it. I mean, we've seen a lot of that stuff in the last couple of years. Politically, there's stuff in the governor's race right now that are just very, very complicated. And we just have to figure out what the right thing to do is.
Yeah. So since you have to juggle so many things and types of stories, because you have an audience and you can't be, it's all Montgomery County, it's all Howard County, it's all Fairfax County. And if you have a good story and you're like, I know this is a good story, it's not necessarily timely, is it good to go ahead and say, hey, listen, this is going to be happening over the next few months. Let's say it's a medical development or something. This is going to be a big deal over the next couple of months. And it's probably something that's going to come out 3 months from now. Just want to get it on your radar. It could be done now as an evergreen, just talking about it coming, or you could sit on it and just, I want you to know it's happening locally. It's going to be a big deal. Is that still a pitch that you want to know about because you want it on your radar?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, that's that kind of strategic thinking. I mean, we have editorial meetings a couple times a day for the day of stuff, and we have them a couple times a week for the future. We're always talking about that kind of stuff. And we'll want to know, yes, news pegs are important, really important. And everybody should always be looking for some news peg because there's got to be a reason why this story is going to be on today and not next week. We had this discussion with Halloween stuff 3 weeks ago, I think before even October started, and we started to see shortages of costumes and shortages of this and people already decorating. And we're like, well, what is going on here? And all right, you know what? We normally wouldn't touch Halloween for another couple of weeks, but we got to get on the board with this. So let's do it. When school was starting earlier and earlier, we said, you know what? We typically save our back to school stuff for a certain time, but it's happening now. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that's going to help us plan, anything that's going to help us, get a story on in the right way. I mean, sometimes stories need more than just a day to tell. And that helps us with that too. We want to do it right. We want to get a certain editor. We want to get certain graphics. We want to make sure that it's told in a way that's doing it justice. So yeah, absolutely. And I like to think that all news organizations respect embargoes. And if there's something that you don't want to report at a certain time, that's fair. What I don't like in those situations, if you basically tell that to everybody and say, this is coming up, you can do it today, or, the next news development is going to be at a certain time. And then, that time is November 4th and November 3rd, somebody else comes out with a story. And we're like, well, wait a minute, I thought November 4th was the next time. And what now if we kind of feel like, that's not kind of fair. So, there's a little bit of that goes on, which a little bit conflicts with what I said earlier about something being on another station. But if it's something that's that big, of course we want to be the first ones to run it and drive the news content.
Back when I was in news, when everything was black and white, we would never accept video from a source or, the person we're interviewing. But during COVID, that all changed. Maybe even before, where we were able to provide.
Well, wait a minute. There was a time period where you could do VNRs as long as they were from respectable sources. And then it was that Bush administration. Remember when they were putting out
I'm not talking about VNRs. I'm just talking about providing B-roll, providing, if they can do a story via Zoom and get some video.
I think what you're talking about is, during COVID, there were definitely times when we were not sending our folks inside places and we would accept video that was shot at an event or something like that to pair with a story. To me, it's all about transparency. The whole, Kathy, the Karen Ryan issue that you just brought up about when she was sort of purporting to be a reporter and was actually a paid political thing, that wasn't transparent. But if our viewers know that, this video was shot by X or whatever like that, that's totally okay. Because again, it shows what it is and we're vetting it. It's not just basically we're just taking it and see, okay, you say that's that. Okay, here you go. We're saying they shot this video and we've talked to them about it and we vetted it and we're comfortable with it. And that was really done for circumstance. It's not something that we like to do, but COVID changed some rules. It made it harder in a lot of ways.
So do you think that will change significantly? I mean, do you think that change, just like people working from home and the whole, will people go back to the office? Will that change a little bit? Will those be more relaxed as long as you have the transparency? Do you think you'll continue to accept video from third parties until you get that one big scandal where everyone's like, no, we can't do it now because somebody ruined it for us?
Well, I don't know what the scandal would be because again, it would, we would be transparent with everything and say this, so-and-so, they shot this video. I think it's like a slow march back I think there definitely will be some things that will continue. I mean, we kind of have a bar for what interviews should be done virtually. Is it a video we can't get any other way? Is there a distance factor? Is somebody out of town? Like, what are the reasons? Or is there some medical issue that somebody has that's preventing us from doing this in person, which is obviously not something we would say on camera. So I would say that some of it will be around a while and some of it will be a slow march back to getting back and doing things like we used to do.
You mentioned cooking segments. Are they back in the studio doing cooking segments, or is that?
We haven't really brought guests back into our studio. We're still doing, we haven't really done that again. But what we have done is we've created some segments on OTT that run on our Air 2 that feature cooking and feature restaurant. We call it First Bites or something like that. I can't, I'm blanking on the name of it because it's only been there for a couple months and I don't have any much to do with it. But yeah, we run that and then we run them on the air. And Anyang goes with a photographer to a place and we shoot something.
You know what story this has nothing to do with anything, but the story I can't get out of my mind is that Montgomery County is 99% vaccinated. That to me is amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, so we couch it. Montgomery County says it's 99% vaccinated. Of the people that have the ability to get vaccinated. I mean, no one has any reason to believe that they're not telling the truth. I mean, we all think that they must be, but I haven't seen those records. We haven't seen those records. And so it's all about how you couch it. But yeah, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
I love, I think it's having been out of news for all this time. I love hearing everything he has to say about how they vet just news is in good hands with Matt Glassman. I'm not kissing ass. I'm serious. He'll yell at me when I send him stuff he doesn't like.
But Matt, I don't think
I just feel good that news.
There's many of us
doing good
I
stuff.
know, but I don't think people realize all the Matt Glassmans that are there. I spend so much time on Facebook defending my former profession because I'm like, do you guys understand? Do you have any idea still to this day, you're only as good as your last story. Your credibility and your reputation as a reporter, as a news organization is everything. Now Fox National News, they will never probably switch their reputation, but local reporters and most like true reporters, and people don't know the difference between talking heads on cable news and true actual reporters. And even if you're owned by Sinclair in Washington, D.C.
Hey, we got to get on these stations.
Those reporters are, they're the real deal and they want the news. They don't bring their politics into this. This is such crap. Journalists need a PR representative to rep them.
Oh, that's what's so bad.
No.
That's right. Well, that's true. I'm in good company. There's certainly a lot of people that I've learned from do what I do at other stations. And sure, there's things I see on the air and my station and others that I'm like, I have the ability to check that at mine, but not at the others. But yeah, we're very careful. And there's certain stories that come out that we haven't done yet, but that doesn't mean we're not working on them. It just means we haven't nailed it down yet. There's one going on right now, a very controversial one in Loudoun County that it just took us a couple of days to really, really get to the people who could confirm the information that was out there. And we did the story last night and we're following up today. And people say, how come you haven't covered this? How dare you? You covered that, but you're not covering this. And it's like, we're trying to do our due diligence here. We can't just assume that because it was in some other publication that it's correct. And otherwise people will stop watching because they're going to be thinking that we're just sort of like, well, I guess I can't really say that because there are some organizations, to your point, that don't necessarily try to match all that reporting and so kind of go out there and throw out some theories and rumors. And, it works for their audience. It wouldn't work for mine.
Yeah. I just wish people knew how hard journalists work and everyone behind the scenes, how truly they put their lives at risk to get to the truth. You guys get a bad rap and it's not fair. I mean, obviously there's a few bad apples everywhere, right? But the media is important now more than ever. And community newspapers and communities losing their small town organizations and small town newspapers, are not going to be able to do justice to that community.
They've been replaced by everybody tweeting things from their communities. That's because that's all they need to see.
Are you teaching at American? What are you telling the kids these days? No, really. What do you do?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been interesting because I've been teaching there for about 13 years. And maybe about 2 years ago, I started to get students in the class who, when we started to work on assignments and everything, they want to work for Rachel Maddow. They want to work for, point of view journalism. And I said to them, I'm like, listen, I'm not teaching you that. I'm not teaching you how to do that. But I'll guarantee you that for Rachel Maddow and her staff to do what they do every night, they've got to understand the other side. They've got to understand understand what all the different pieces are to this story. And so what I'm going to do is help train you how to think about that stuff and critically think about what elements are needed for every single story in that way. And you can take that to Rachel Maddow, and she and her staff can teach you how to turn that into point of view journalism, and all the other people too, that not just her. I just use her because that was the example that a couple of the students gave. So that's been interesting. You know what? It's really teaching them how to think and how to be curious. Phones have just ruined that. It used to be, you remember when you couldn't remember something, what was it? It had really kind of, exercise your mind. I don't even know if your mind works that way, but I imagine that it does, because you're just really trying to think of what it is and really exercise your mind. And now if you can't remember something in a split second, you just look on your phone and you've got it. And so what I'm trying to teach them is how to wonder and how to think about things. We start every day with, I give them a real press release or a real situation that's come into our newsroom. And I say, come up with 10 story angles for this story. What are the story angles? And then we go through each one of them and say, this is how a journalist would approach this story. Let's just say it was some big accident or something like that, like the metro derailment. And they'd say, oh, well, call the hospital and talk to the patient who was rushed there. And they don't know. They're journalism students. We talk about HIPAA and we talk about, what it means to call a hospital and all that kind of stuff. So, there's a lot of things that they learn just from that. And what I'm trying to do is get them to think, because the three things that I think every young journalist needs is they've got to be curious. They've got to understand story angles and be able to sort of think outside the box and all corners of the box. And they need to know how to write, because that helps them be enterprising.
Teaching them how to write, is that the hardest thing? That's hard for anybody.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. Because these are people who have never written this way before for the most part, and they've learned to write papers and they've learned to write things like that, some creative writing, and this is different. And journalism is written in a different way than it used to be. Again, it's not all about this is what the news is that's happened. Here's the news and this is what it means to you, or here's the news and this is the context, because nobody just gives this is what happened yesterday kind of stuff anymore.
So is that also a good way for a PR person to write a pitch? Like basically write the subject line, like you said, like a headline, but even write the pitch, almost like a reporter would write the story. That way, the reporter or the person receiving it at the newsroom knows they get it. They know my business. They hear me. They know me. But also I can see it faster because, I've got the headline, I've got the subheadline, I've got the tease, and I've got the, it's written in journalistic style.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't want to read anything that's like, okay, know-it-all, you give me all this kind of stuff. But yeah, anything that you want, obviously, most people that you're pitching to aren't going to unilaterally decide whether that's a story. So anything that you can provide to help them figure out how to make sure that story hits it, which goes back to figuring out what the stations are looking for. And figuring out some sort of emotional angle, emotional connection, that it's not just going to be a story with talking heads, or it's not just going to be a story about one guy saying that you should get 20-year mortgages instead of 30%. There's actually some good reasons for this, and it could help a lot of you save a lot of money.
Well, she's fashioning that, this is no joke, into a sort of a BuzzFeed pitch, 5 reasons you need to do.
Great. That's great. If it's a trend, X number of reasons, absolutely. Sure.
Yeah, I have a pitch that's been really successful, but I really want it in BuzzFeed. So I'm like, I'm going to write my pitch BuzzFeedy.
Well, send it to him. Okay.
No, I've got a really good story.
Last question.
I got a really good story for him. I'm going to follow up later.
Okay.
It's good.
Send it to me.
The HIV story.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's good.
That's good. That's local.
Local biotech curing HIV. Seriously, freaking go.
Well, Walk to HIV is next weekend. There's your news peg.
Okay. There you go. I'm going to email you.
All right. He's got news to cover. I am so, I learned.
We can talk to you all day, man.
Let the guy go. My God. But news is in good hands. And it's.
I feel good as a former reporter.
I do feel good. One last question. Is there any, I got to go read these things from the people who've gone over to the dark side kind of thing? They couldn't make it.
Former journalists who turned PR people.
They were news people, but not really.
No, because I think we'll all be there one day. I hope not.
Hey, our doors are open, Matt. Come on.
No, again, if there are some PR people who have burned me in the past, and that I will, unless it's an amazing thing, I just won't work with them. There's some firms and some people that have either burned me on a story and not been contrite, or have a reputation and a history with me of not coming through, that I will always be like, okay, I'm reading this with a grain of salt. But for the most part, no. Everybody, the bottom line is that every single person that sends a pitch has an equal chance of it getting covered. It's just a question of what the story is and how you're pitching it. And sometimes that can make it get on the news faster than if it's something that somebody just sort of sends some rambling thing, or to your point earlier, a small business owner who's just basically saying, hey, please cover my business because I can earn money. But you know, every email has an equal chance of getting on the air.
Make sure they can see the forest through the trees, as he said, and make sure people understand why it's important to you. So,
yeah, why this matters to your viewers, why your viewers should care about this.
Don't throw spaghetti at the wall.
That's true.
Which we're guilty of sometimes. We are.
Everybody is.
Not very guilty. We try to, every now and then we're guilty, but most of the time we try not to do that, because we just know what works, and what works is really doing our homework and getting to know reporters. But yeah, sometimes
this is
there's
mandatory
spaghetti.
listening. All right, we're gonna make every employee listen to this.
All right.
As they do they can't wait every week.
Oh yeah, I know they can't wait. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. You guys are good people. I'm happy to help any way I can.
Thank you. We are honored to have you, and we definitely learned a lot today.
Wonderful.
That was amazing.
Yeah, if you didn't understand news before, I think you do now.
Yeah, I mean, and really, it sounded a little ass kissy on my part, but the news is in good hands. And if you realize what these people go through a day and how hard there's rigorous standards, and
everybody in America
stories.
who complains about the media needs to actually meet some journalists and see what they go through, and vetting stories and trying to get it right, and what their day
getting it right.
No, yeah, but the efforts you have to go to make sure it's right. When I mean trying to get it right is, there are struggles and times, and sometimes you got to pull a story at the last minute because you don't have it right yet, and you're too afraid that you can't get it wrong. I mean, people do not realize that your reputation is everything in news. And these people who just think media is all fake news and we all just, they all just make stuff up. They could not be further from the truth. So I hope even the people who aren't interested in pitching, I hope other people would listen to this and just understand the integrity that goes into news.
Yeah, it's a sacred right. And these guys treat it such.
Yes, as they should. Yeah. They treat it as they should. And it's important stuff. It's the fourth estate.
Okay.
Saves our world.
Plus he used to drive Savannah Guthrie home.
I know. That's so sweet.
That's a great little story there.
She didn't have a car. Yeah. If you like what you heard today, or even if you hated it, either way, be sure.
No, you can't hate it. There's something to hate.
Whatever. Somebody could hate.
There's no hating.
They could hate my screeching every now and then when I get really excited. But anyway, be sure to follow us on Twitter at On The Mark Media. Yeah, good advice. At On The Mark Media, so you know when our latest podcast will post. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on Instagram, all at that's the little @ sign, On The Mark with a C Media. All marks are with a C. All marks should be with a C.
Are you doing your news voice because we were talking newscast and news?
Well, I'm trying to.
Let me hear that news voice.
Maybe it would. Is there anything? No, I can't even do it now. I've lost it. But yeah, I'm trying to do an audition for Matt in case he listens.
You're cutting out of here. You're leaving us.
I'm out of this podcast. I'm going back to news.
You're going back. You're leaving the dark side, huh?
No, I appreciate everything they do. I do not want to go back.
Off the Mark is a production of On the Mark Media. Until next time, I'm Mark Silverstein.
I'm Kathy, and you are listening to The Bickering.